College football has changed forever, and Notre Dame is changing with it. Coming up, we're breaking down how Notre Dame changed their approach in the transfer portal and how it could define the next era of Notre Dame football. That's next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in to this crossover edition of Locked On Irish and the Portal. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network, all thanks to your support. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum, producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish for the last 5 years. Today is Wednesday, January 21st, and thank you for getting your day started right here by making this your first watch or listen to the day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Before we get rolling, please make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel or following the show wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, the Friday mailbag is coming up, so drop your questions in the YouTube comments on X at Locked On Irish or on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. We've got a great show lined up for you today. I'm going to be joined by Locked On's recruiting and transfer portal insider Brian Smith in just a moment, and we're diving deep into the state of college football recruiting and all the transfer portal movement. We'll talk about how the portal is reshaping roster construction across the league, why Notre Dame took a different approach this cycle, and whether what we're seeing now represents a permanent shift in how championship teams are built. Then we'll break down Notre Dame's portal additions and finish with a look at the quarterback room and what's next for the Irish at the most important position. We've got a lot to get into, so let's bring in Brian. All right, I'm excited to be joined by Brian Smith once again. And Brian, you have always said that college football is about 80% recruiting. But in 2026, how has that evolved now that the transfer portal plays such a big role in roster building?
It can be a lot of different directions, but most schools that win it or get deep into the playoff, Indiana's obviously the anomaly of all anomalies. They dominate high school recruiting. Georgia, Texas, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Miami, these teams have top 10 classes. Indiana makes that barometer look weird. And obviously Bud Elliott's blue chip ratio was busted because Indiana wasn't 10% blue chip. Like there's busting it, then there's that. But the shortest path of making to the playoff is still exactly the formula that Marcus Freeman's doing: 8 transfers and a boatload of 4 and 5 stars. That's your best path. So don't get it twisted. Indiana is a once in 50-year team.
Okay, but going forward with Indiana, like they obviously just won a national championship with the roster built heavily through the transfer portal, and they really emphasized getting guys who had already played a ton of college football. Now, I do think we're about to see some significant change in terms of the rules with the NCAA. Looks like we could be nearing a 5-for-5 situation where a player can only be in college for 5 years, and it doesn't matter if they redshirt or not. And we're also still finally just getting away from that extra COVID year of eligibility. So you obviously see Indiana as an outlier, but do you think the idea of adding very veteran, experienced players and building your roster that way through the transfer portal, is that going to represent a real philosophical shift in how championship teams are built going forward?
I think a lot of people would like to do it, but they're expensive. BYU has always been that way, but they're Mormon missions. Like they'll have 24 and 25-year-old linemen. They'll redshirt a kid. He'll go on a mission. So his freshman year is basically his 4th year of college, like 4th year out of high school. Then they start. So their clock begins. I don't know how to put that into perspective, but when teams can, they want to take 22-year-olds. That's not, especially in the trenches. Notre Dame, most of the kids that play, they don't start till their 3rd year. There are the exceptions, like the big fella in Indianapolis. They had to find a way to get him on the field. They had a kid that was a starter that transferred out. Okay, Quentin Nelson's that guy. But by and large, most guys are 3rd and 4th year players. So everybody wants to get the older players. And I work with Coastline Stars, a 7-on-7 organization. We're just at Battle Miami. All the kids, we got tons of kids with elite offers, but it's kind of stopped right now because everybody's waiting on the portal to end. I said, you guys are going to have to wait till early February because everybody's trying to sign everybody now. Once we get to about February 1st, it'll be back on because they want these older players. And the kids, for the first time, anytime I've been around kids, kind of understood it. It's kind of sunk in. So, yeah, you're probably right. But Notre Dame, they actually got a little younger with their portal group this year than they normally do, which is probably a good thing on another front because they're taking some undergrad transfers. and they're taking guys that fit their program still. Like Indiana, Indiana took 13 guys from JMU last year. 8 of them came back. Not only did they get guys that they knew because they came over with the staff, but they got their top guys and they came back. Aiden Fisher being probably the most key guy, like he kind of ran the defense. So if you can get older players, that's your best way to kind of maneuver into the Notre Dame, Georgia, Miami, Ohio State realm, because otherwise it's going to be really hard.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up with Notre Dame because they took a noticeably different approach this year by adding more undergraduate transfers with multiple years of eligibility. Indiana built a roster that was all about production over potential, and I think Notre Dame isn't banking entirely on potential. It's more of a healthy mix between the two. But what does that tell you about how their philosophy is evolving under Marcus Freeman?
I think it shows that Marcus is working with the institution very well, first and foremost. And Freeman talked about that in his recent press conference. You got to work with each other. Everybody's going to be on the same page, that kind of stuff. And if you want to read it or go listen to it, Marcus talks about it somewhat. But getting to some guys that are underclassmen, Graham and Porter, guys like that, they weren't ever getting into Notre Dame before. Flat out. They hated it. The people that ran like the English department, they were flat out adamant, did not care. Could you imagine what Lou Holtz would have done if they had this rule? Are you kidding me? They would have ran roughshod over college football. But they have it now. And a lot of people don't know how Notre Dame operates with transfers and how that works. They probably don't care. They're about to find out why it's very, very important. Because Brewu wouldn't have been there. Neither receiver from Ohio State wouldn't have been there. Just that alone, you can stop right there. Those are 3 potential National Football League guys that you're adding with multiple years of eligibility. That's pretty substantial.
So big picture, when you look at how Notre Dame was able to retain its current players and then use the transfer portal and also elevate its high school recruiting, especially with this incoming recruiting class, what stood out to you the most as they prepare for obviously a hugely important 2026 season?
Wow, trying to figure that. That's a tough one. Maybe out of everything they did, the D-line acquisitions, especially because they have multiple years of eligibility, it's just hard to get D tackles. Notre Dame is fortunate. They recruit O-line well enough. We didn't even have to look at offensive tackle. They're one of 2 or 3 schools in the country that wasn't looking to add a tackle. That's how hard it is to find them. So Tionne Gray, Francis Brewu, and then pick whichever skill player you want on either side. Kid from Michigan, Jayden, all those guys, you can pick whichever one you want to say that's the most important or how they did it. I'm good with any of it. Notre Dame's portal class for what they need is as good as any in the country. They only needed 8 guys. By the way, getting a kicker, normally I would just kind of yawn at. That might be the most important acquisition. I got to throw that in there.
I thought of you when they added Spencer Porath, and I'm like, this is good. This means that Brian will allow himself to watch Notre Dame football this year. So at least we got that out of the way. And then this afternoon, somewhat surprisingly, I guess they flipped a kicker who was committed to Michigan, actually signed with Michigan in December. He's the number 1 kicker in the class of 2026. And I say that with hesitation because obviously Eric Schmidt was the number 1 high school kicker in the country. Okay. And that didn't work out super well his freshman year. But it looks like Notre Dame is going to go into 2026 with 3 scholarship kickers. You got to imagine one of those 3 is going to be good. But last question before we move on to this next segment here. In terms of overall talent and depth, now that Notre Dame is probably finished in the transfer portal here, how would you rate this current Notre Dame roster compared to some of the best teams that they've had in recent years?
This is the best roster in terms of totality, even that Freeman's had. So it's the best roster since the Holtz era because of the D tackle depth. For those who don't know, right before we went into the, by the way, good timing for us.
Great timing.
I mean, you literally could not have done this better. So congratulations to Tyler and Brian. But Jason Onye, as we do this podcast, has been announced that he's been granted a quote-unquote 6th year. You add that to Brew, you add that to Gray and some other young, like Elijah. It's like they're loaded at D tackle. Name one time in your lifetime you've said that.
I could have said that 2 weeks ago.
I'm over 50 and I've never said it. This is the deepest roster they've had from a balance in key position standpoint. There is the one caveat, and I'm just going to say it. We'll talk about it many times before the beginning of next season. the overall health and mentality of one Charles Jagusa is the unknown. 3 years of like playing 4 games or something. He's unbelievably gifted. He's just had the worst luck possible. If he plays healthy next year, you could argue they're the preseason number one, especially with Onye being back at Notre Dame. So that's my one question.
All right, we have covered the big picture. Now let's get into the specifics and break down the players Notre Dame added in the portal and what they can do to elevate the roster in 2026. That's coming right up. Thank you for making Locked On Irish and the Portal your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you have not already, make sure you check out our new Everydayer Club. You'll get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Irish. It's the same show, same schedule, just no ads, and it works on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. If you listen every day, it's a really easy upgrade. Go to lockedonirish.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving all customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game day of the playoffs. Because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. Here's what I love about it. You get to use the profit boost on the bets you already feel good about. You can ride with the favorite when you think a team controls the matchup, or you can take a shot on the underdog if you feel an upset coming. And if you're really feeling confident, go all in and build a parlay around the players and moments you think will decide the game. Then you apply the profit boost and go after even bigger winnings. And when you win, FanDuel pays out instantly, which is perfect for playoff football. Sunday is shaping up to be an incredible day of football. I like the favorites in both matchups. I'm going to take the Seahawks to cover -2.5 against the Rams in the NFC Championship, and the New England Patriots to cover on the road against the Broncos without Bo Nix. FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your NFL playoff profit boosts every game day. All right, welcome back to this crossover edition of Locked On Irish and the Portal. I'm Tyler Wojcick here with Brian Smith, and now I want to dive into the players that Notre Dame added this cycle. And let's start at wide receiver. Notre Dame brings in Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter, 2 former 5-stars from Ohio State, with a ton of upside, but pretty limited production so far in their collegiate careers. What are your expectations for them in 2026?
Compete, play at an elite level, in practice, be leaders, all that. Because this team's, I'm not going to worry about starters at this point, except for CJ. Obviously, quarterback's a different deal. There really isn't a position where you couldn't be in a position later in the season where somebody's banged up a little. You go to the second team guy. There's not a spot. Maybe tight end. They've had so many guys injured. I assume that'll be taken care of, by the way. They need some good luck with tight end. They're all in a position where they can rotate guys. Even the running back room, losing 2 potential first-round picks, it's insane. So just as long as they practice hard and they blend in, the stats will take care of themselves. Who starts and all that, if they blend in, it won't matter. They'll get their chance at the draft too, because this team is loaded. So just compete at a high level, and it'll kind of take care of itself.
It seems like Quincy Porter is the bigger name. I think it's just because he was the 5-star in the more recent class. That's not to say that Mylan Graham wasn't a huge name coming out of high school, but Graham's been in college for 2 years, redshirted his freshman year, hasn't played a ton so far. But personally, I like Graham more, even though I think Porter fits a more obvious need. Like Notre Dame is looking to replace Malachi Fields at the boundary wide receiver, and Quincy Porter feels like he could be a plug-and-play guy at the boundary. But I don't know. There's something I really like about Mylan Graham, and I know that Notre Dame already has a really good field receiver, Jordan Faison, and they've got Jaden Greathouse in the slot. But to me, it's going to be about getting your top 3 best wide receivers on the field. So I think it might end up being Graham, Faison, and Greathouse. How do you see that starting 3 playing out?
I spoke to Brian Driscoll about this and a few other Notre Dame people, just like fans. I can't figure it out for sure because Porter's gifted enough to play flanker or the boundary. He's 6'3.5", 6'4", and he's always been that guy. Actually, the team I work with in 7-on-7 is Coastline. We got a couple of the guys from Bergen Catholic, and they said even when they were freshmen, he was coming up, he was always locked in to practice. Everything he did, he was about that business. So he's just going to want a chance, which means to me he's going to take everything that he can, hit the ground running with the playbook to get it done. I'm hoping they can move him around and he's not pigeonholed, because even like Jeremiah is as rare as it gets. And that's why he's pretty much like, there's just no, everybody knows that Jeremiah's going to get the ball. Okay. There's one Jeremiah, and that's fair. But Jeremiah also thought Porter was next up at Ohio State. I know Jeremiah, and he does not hand out compliments at all. So when I heard that, I'm like, oh, okay, that's a little different. So I hope it's Porter because you can't teach 6'3 plus. And he's a guy that is from a program that I'm very familiar with, and Notre Dame fans are, Bergen, that like Bergen Catholic's always had guys that helps Notre Dame out on the East Coast. And I think you could play some mix and match with Faison too. Great house. Like they can move those guys around because that's what they do with Jeremiah at Ohio State. So he doesn't get, easily doubled. I bet you Notre Dame doesn't have spots quite as much this year, which will make it a lot of fun.
Right. And we know Mike Denbrock loves motion. So it's really just going to be about creating mismatches. And if you can get Quincy Porter lined up against a safety somehow, even if he's in the slot, that's a matchup that CJ Carr is going to be able to take advantage of. So we've already talked a little bit about the defensive tackles. It was clearly the biggest need for Notre Dame this cycle when we didn't know the status of Jason Onye. Well, now we know he's coming back for a 6th year. They were able to go out and add Francis Brew from Pittsburgh and Tionne Grey from Oregon. So now with the returning guys in the room, you got Elijah Hughes, and then you're hoping that maybe some of the young, unproven guys like a Cole Mullins, Sean Sevillano, or Christopher Burgess could take a big step forward this season. But how do you see Brew and Gray and Onye and Hughes? How do they all complement each other on the interior of the defensive line?
I'll put it this way. The most important to me is the one that'll end up with the least statistical impact, and that's Tionne Gray. God only created so many guys that are 6'5 plus 330 that can move. He's one of them. But he's also going to command a double team because the thought of your quarterback being smashed by Tionne Gray is probably not top of the board for any quarterback or OC. But that also means Brew, who's very good, as Notre Dame found out when they played Pittsburgh, at penetration and disrupting, he's going to be one-on-one more often. Same thing for any other player on that list, especially a guy like Elijah Hughes next to Tionne. I think that's a great combo because he's a guy that he's a little wild and takes a few chances. But if you're single covered and Tionne is big enough to take 2 gaps just by standing there, I mean, dude, he's humongous.
I know.
So big.
6'6", 336. That's what he's listed at on the Oregon website. And I was just like, man, I feel bad to be a guard or a center going up against him, man. That's insane.
Listed, by the way. I'm just going to leave it at that. I imagine that Notre Dame will find different ways to use certain players against certain packages, kind of like Heinisch. Wasn't the biggest guy, but he was so quick, he created havoc. So did his older brother. You find niches. I think Elijah will be that guy with Tionne, but when they have Onye in the game, you talked about Indiana, like grown man strength, 22, 23. Jason's a big old dude. He's 310, something like that. He ain't far from Tionne, and he's probably a better pure power player with leverage that's proven it. Just can't stay healthy all the time. There might be situations, 3rd and 2, they go with those 2 guys. Can't double on both. I mean, there's just so many advantages to having that. They've never had anything like this remotely, depth-wise, ever in my lifetime. So they're going to just do packages for who they're playing against. They play a power team, you'll see more of those 2 guys, right? Gray and Onye. You play teams that get it out quick. Okay, Gray probably won't play as much. But Notre Dame has a match for anything that you do. So I think they'll complement each other each and every week to the best of their ability.
Let's talk about Keon Keeley. The former 5-star was originally committed to Notre Dame, flipped to Alabama, and just never quite broke through there. Now he returns to South Bend. How realistic is it that a change of scenery just completely unlocks his potential?
I'll put it to you this way. I'm very familiar with Bama. Keeley, personally, I knew him when he was in high school because I lived in Tampa when he did. I knew him pretty well. They got him too big. He was 282 or something like that. That's ridiculous. Trying to play outside linebacker at 280. Give me a break. They screwed that up. The James Smith kid that Notre Dame tried to get, Quay Russo, they both out of Ohio State, they were elite guys just as good. None of them hit their potential under that DC. I'm going to throw it at it's more Bama than the players. To that end, you still have to respond and do better. Keeley played better as this season went on, but I think he needs to lose 20 to 30 pounds. Play edge, not drop as much. Like, again, Bama was dropping a 280-pound guy. Come on. It just doesn't make any sense. So let him go downhill more often, a few stunts here and there. But he's 6'4 and a half, 6'5", 250 pounds coming off the edge. It's going to help him. And then he doesn't have to, again, because Notre Dame has depth. Boubacar on one side, Bryce on the other. They got other young players coming up. They're going to be able to rotate and do different things. They might run him as a stand-up end. I think he could be a very impactful guy, but he won't have to play more than 250 snaps. That's a great problem to have. So he should be full go, and that'll be an advantage.
Notre Dame surprised a lot of people when they took 2 defensive backs in this cycle. I think most people expected they would take one, a nickel, but they end up taking Jayden Sanders from Michigan and D.J. McKinney from Colorado. How do you expect those two to fit into Chris Ash's defense in 2026?
I think it's to be determined. You have some preliminary thoughts on where they're going to play, but you really don't know until kids go through spring ball. What if Leonard Moore gets a high ankle sprain, God forbid, during spring ball? Not that he has to play much. I'm sure he'll play very little. Well, which guy plays boundary? Well, maybe one of them that you didn't expect is your boundary, and they end up being the backup, and you move guys around. You find things out in spring. But much like D-line, which, by the way, Notre Dame might be the deepest team in the country this next year at D-tackle. I never thought I'd utter those words. Notre Dame's secondary, as you've noted on this show with me and other times that I've watched your pod, if it's not number 1 in the nation next year, it's top 3. I would right now, especially with Jayden coming in, because he's like, you don't start at Michigan as a freshman. He started a few games, and he's a physical kid. He's an East Texas kid. Love East Texas recruits because they take football very serious. They're a physical, workman-like kind of mentality. I think Notre Dame kind of hit the home run here. They will, out of this group that's on campus this fall, I'll go ahead and make a prediction. At some point, barring major injuries, 7 or 8 of the guys that are on campus will play in the NFL in some capacity. It's insane. So who plays where? I really don't care. It's just, I know they're very talented. And Leonard Moore is your ringleader, but still, Tate Johnson and these other guys, like, they have a chance at multiple first-round picks. That's a good sign.
If Notre Dame can get pressure with 4, I really don't know how teams are going to be able to complete a pass on that secondary. Like, if they really can get pressure off the edges, collapse the pocket, and you're trying to throw in man coverage, against Leonard Moore, and you've got Tate Johnson and Adon Schuler flying around back there. I'm really interested to see what they end up doing in nickel. I think they're going to give Sanders, McKinney, and Dallas Golden a shot at winning that job because it seems like they just prefer to have Christian Gray over there at the field. If they wanted to move him over to nickel, they had a perfect opportunity to do it this past season when Stevonte Smith went down, but they didn't. They decided to move Dallas Golden there with 1 week's notice, and he actually did okay. So I think that's going to be a very interesting position battle. But to your point, whoever wins that job is probably going to do just fine. But when you look at this group as a whole, would you say that Notre Dame's transfer portal class met your expectations, or do they go above or beyond?
Oh, they crushed them. And here's the irony. I remember scrolling on YouTube about a week and a half ago. There was this guy named Tyler Wojcick in his preliminary report saying Notre Dame is not off to a good start. And I just kept scrolling. You weren't wrong. But
you're not the first person to point that out too, by the way. But
I have a few people in the office at Notre Dame might have mentioned that to you. But the point is still the same. It was true. They didn't even get anybody on campus the first weekend by design. That they screwed it up. But on the backside, we'll talk about this months from now. We let it die for a while. Can you be disappointed with how it finished? I mean,
no, of course not.
This is kind of like the MLB team that starts out in April and they're 500 for the first month. You're like, you guys were picked top 3 in MLB. What's going on? And then late June, they catch fire. Then they win the division and go to the World Series. Notre Dame just caught fire later. It worked out. I'm not saying I suggest to go this route again. Let me be clear. But the portal was an A because they never hit the home run with D-tackle in any way, shape, or form. Ever. And they got 2 more DBs to arguably the best DB group in the country. How are you going to complain when you also get, oh, by the way, we got Porter and Graham coming in, and we got a kicker that's established. Like, they hit on everything. So, yeah, it's an A.
I did feel better when Marcus Freeman even admitted that he was a little bit riled up after the first weekend of the transfer portal, because he talked about in his press conference that he said that Mike Martin had to keep him steady, kept reminding him, we're running our race here. So I'm like, look, Marcus Freeman, not always similar in terms of emotions and all that, but for a moment there, it felt like he was one of us when even he was like, yeah, I was a little bit frustrated at the way the transfer portal started. But like you said, they closed it out in a great way. So we have covered the portal class and the impact players. Now it's time to look ahead. Coming up, we're going to dive into the quarterback room in Teddy Jarrard's rise and what Notre Dame's future looks like under center. Stay with us. All right, we are back here on this crossover episode of Locked On Irish in the Portal. And Brian, you had a chance to see quarterback Teddy Jarrard up close this past weekend at the opening in battle 7-on-7. What stood out to you about his game and where he's at developmentally as he prepares to reclassify and start his college career early?
Teddy is not a normal teenager. Like he's going to major in real estate at Notre Dame. He thinks big picture, very cerebral. If I ask him after a play, even after the game or a day later, he can tell you where everybody was on the field and like draw it up like in the air. Like he's different. That's the first thing I know about him, because the hardest position to grade and project long-term is quarterback, probably in all of sport, because 80% of football is recruiting. Well, 80% of figuring out quarterback is what we don't know. And that's what's going on in the meeting room. Well, I get to talk to Teddy. Like I sit next to Teddy on the plane when we go to these tournaments and stuff, and we talk about stuff at the airport and everything else. He's not a normal guy. Like he already has like Notre Dame's playbook and all that. He knows what it's like. By the way, that thing is massive. Good luck to Teddy on that. Holy crap, I saw that thing. But the fact of the matter is he loves that stuff. Like he can make all the throws, but if you don't know where the hell to go with the football, it's irrelevant. He makes things happen that other guys don't see. He can tell you why a play should or should not be run in advance. The kid just turned 18 on this past Saturday. So he's a different kind of cat. As far as his play, the first team we played, I got him on Coastline. I work with Coastline 7-on-7. We got elite dudes. There's no question. We got guys going to go to all the major Georgias and Ohio States and Notre Dames and all that. First play of the tournament, he throws a fade ball down the corner, tight coverage, 25-yard gain, because he put it on a dot. Like that's just who he has no fear. And he throws it into tight windows, and he doesn't care who he's going against. This is what I do. And I know this isn't a fair comparison. Like his demeanor and the way he carries himself, he reminds me of two guys, Brady Quinn, who I knew when he was recruited, and then just from seeing him on TV all the time, Tom Brady. Like they just kind of stone face. This is who I am. That's it. He doesn't care about anything else. I'm just going forward. I think he's going to be an NFL player. It's just a matter of when. And he'll compete in his second year for the starting job. He is a very rare player.
Well, right now, Notre Dame is looking for a backup quarterback. It doesn't seem like they're going to land one in the transfer portal. So who do you think ends up being CJ Carr's primary backup in 2026? Is it going to be Blake Hebert or Noah Grubbs or even Teddy Jarrard, even though he'll be joining the team in the summer after spring practice?
Not a clue. What I was just talking about with the playbook will probably determine some of that. And I kind of guess. I mean, Hebert will have an advantage because that's a big dude. What is he, 225? Like He looks like he's your modern day H-back, but he's playing quarterback. They might use him in packages. They might have multiple backups. But Teddy, like him coming in, like I hope he doesn't even have to worry about it this year. And although Teddy's super competitive, he gets it. The reason he wants to enroll early is, to get a chance at Grubbs, because they know CJ's probably going to leave after next year. He doesn't want Grubbs to have a year ahead of him in addition to what Hebert already has. So I don't know how that'll go, because that's just a playbook thing. Who understands the playbook? Because they all have arm strength. They all have their mental abilities and all that. That's just going to be playbook.
All right, so last question I have for you. This week, Notre Dame offered class of 2027 quarterback Wonderful Mons IV out of Vero Beach, Florida. Just an incredible name, especially for a quarterback. He is currently the number 17 quarterback in the 24/7 Sports composite rankings, but he is expected to rise a little bit later on. What stands out to you about his game, and how does he fit into Notre Dame's quarterback plans now that Jarrard is classifying and they're kind of attacking the class of 2027 pretty late for a quarterback?
A few things. We've always called him Champ. I think that's his nickname. But when I saw him at Rivals 5-star this past summer, Teddy was there too. When he walks into the room, except for just the fact that what his age is, he's 22, something like that. He was 15 or 16. Like he is, like his legs, his body, like that is not a normal human being. Arm strength for days, a little raw, but just has a cannon. And not everybody sees kids. The networks have different events where not everybody gets to go. I guarantee you, for those that have seen him live, look at him a little bit differently, like game or whatever. And I do know that Ohio State was targeting him early. I'm good with their ranking on quarterback above all else. So he will be a top 5 quarterback in the 27 class. He was originally at 28, but because of the politics of all this stuff, it'll probably happen slowly. Trust me, that matters. Great kid, huge arm, huge upside. Anybody that gets him is very fortunate.
All right, make sure you check out Brian's daily show, The Portal, for everything you need to know about transfer portal movement and high school recruiting. You can find it on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Brian, really appreciate the time as always, and I'm sure we'll do this again soon.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
That's going to do it for today's crossover episode. Thanks again for making this your first watch or listen of the day. And before you get on with the rest of your day, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube, follow the show wherever you get your podcast, and leave a like or a 5-star review. And don't forget to send in your questions for the Friday mailbag in the YouTube comments or on X at Locked On Irish or on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Irish ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonirish.supercast.com to join the club. I'm going to be back tomorrow to break down the biggest questions facing Notre Dame during a pivotal offseason. I'll see you then.